Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I'd like to welcome you to the Daily Compliance News. The Daily Compliance News is an offering of the Compliance Podcast Network. October 15th, 2019, the More Than Meets the Eye edition. First up, from the New York Times, Boeing's board of directors has removed Chairman Dennis Muilenburg as the chairman of the board. He still remains the company's chief executive, but Mr. Muilenburg lost his title as chairman, a rebuke from the board that had previously defended his leadership after the two 737 MAX crashes. However, since that time, in the most recent statement, it was probably April or May, the outlook for Boeing has worsened. The 737 MAX, its best-selling jet, and one of its biggest sources of revenue, remains grounded after 7 months. New problems with the plane continue to crop up, causing repeated delays, although the company says it expects the plane to be cleared to fly again by the end of the year. It has struggled to persuade international regulators that it has developed an adequate fix for the automated system, which caused or contributed to both fatalities. Next up, in a really interesting article in the Financial Times, it is a discussion about software monitoring, but not from the compliance perspective, but rather from the employee well-being perspective. The software which scans emails for signs of bad behavior can also monitor employee well-being. That you can determine, or at least get indicia, that an employee is stressed out, is depressed, or other negative factors or indicators which might show that an employee's work situation might need to be changed. You might need to have less work assigned to that employee. It's certainly a tool that could be used to help companies achieve this. Of course, that presupposes a company actually cares about such things, and if you work in one of those places that doesn't tend to care about overwork, and you're working 12 to 15 hours a day, and believe me, I've worked in those kinds of places, you know that such software monitoring is useless. But I have heard of some companies that actually do care about the health and well-being of their employees, and this might be an interesting way for them to both monitor and monitor. Next up, I think everyone listening to this podcast is aware of the Vale mine dam disasters over the past few years in Brazil. Well, apparently those structures exist in the United States. And in an article in the Wall Street Journal, it says that mine waste dams around the world have drawn a new scrutiny after the collapse in Brazil of the Vale mine, and indeed there are such mines in Minnesota. So if those mines collapse, there could be a very catastrophic loss of life, but they're the same types of mines that existed or exist in Brazil. So hopefully the safety concerns will weigh out over those. And finally, a very interesting article in the New York Times, which took a look at the hiring practices, gift, travel, and entertainment of Deutsche Bank to garner business in China. And in a really extensive article, they took a deep dive into the practices Deutsche Bank used to woo Chinese government officials and employees, or officials rather, of state-owned enterprises. It's a far larger picture, and frankly much more damning than the recent FCPA actions involving Deutsche Bank. So you have to wonder, was this information disclosed to the Department of Justice and the Securities and Exchange Commission? How is it that Deutsche Bank received such a really a minimal fine, I think of $16 million going forward? The article details a wide variety of evidence in the form of spreadsheet, emails, documentation, which demonstrated a clear pattern or practice of paying gratuities, gifts, and other large inducements to Chinese government officials. Thanks for listening to the Daily Compliance News, and I hope you have a great weekend.